Hello.
Are we on for real? Are we on for real now?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
we're
mean, I can
actually
edit this out, but
okay. We're actually taping.
yes.
Okay,
Now
is
I
my mouth
believe.
close enough to the speaker?
Hi, guys. Welcome to the I Have a Feeling YouTube channel. I'm Allie,
I'm Deborah.
and we're here to create a safe space to have some deep and tough conversations. We are mother and daughter, so
We are.
that's our little fun dynamic. And today we wanted to specifically talk about this really wild documentary that I watched, and then mom watched. I told my mom about it, and I was like, "You have to watch this. Like, it's the
W-
weirdest thing ever."
Yeah, and when you told me about it, I thought that's the most bizarre thing I've ever heard of, and that's dumb, and I'm not gonna. I'm a grown woman. I'm not gonna watch that stupid show.
I
Is what I said. Like okay, well, okay, one of those things. Yeah, 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 Allie. And then started watching it and was riveted to the psychology really behind what was happening to this woman on this documentary.
Yeah, it is. It's wild. So
It
the
was wild.
I'm a documentary queen. Okay, I love watching documentaries. I love it.
Me
It's
too.
way more interesting to me than any like show that I've ever watched. Like
Mhm.
I love like real life documentaries and
You've
all that
always
kind of
been
stuff.
like that too. You've
Yeah,
always been.
I love true crime. I love all that kind of stuff. But some of these like documentaries that Netflix has been putting out recently are really crazy. So this one in particular is called Bad Vegan. And just to give kind of a general, like, in case you guys haven't watched it, I would suggest going and watching it because it's only 4 episodes. They're
Yeah,
each like 30 minutes long. It's not
something
a
like that.
super huge time commitment, um, but it is definitely worth the watch. But just to give kind of an idea of what it was about if you haven't seen it, or don't have Netflix or whatever, um, it's about this woman who opens a raw vegan food restaurant called Pure Food and Wine in New York City in like the late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yeah, so
And then she starts to like kind of pick up relevancy and she starts to get really well known and she's a super beautiful woman, so she's like well on her way to having like a really famous and really like well-known restaurant.
right. She catches on really quick. Like the whole
Yeah.
idea of it she made it really popular.
Yeah, her name is Sarma. That's the woman's name.
Right.
And so Sarma's kind of going along, and um, she meets this man who calls himself Shane. His name is Shane Fox, as he presents himself to her, and he is this like protective, really like manly man sort of
Kind of
dude.
military ops kind
Yeah,
of
he
deal.
said that
What
he
you think that that's kind of cool and scary, or not scary, but like intriguing.
Yeah. So he says he works in Black Ops, um, and he's like this really like just very elusive, interesting character. She meets him through Alec Baldwin, literally like the real Alec Baldwin.
Yep.
She like meets him through Alec because her restaurant got so famous in New York that all these she knows all these celebrities or is like friendly with all these celebrities. So she meets this guy through Alec Baldwin. It's like this whole thing, and then kind of as she um is dating, I guess, this guy. Their relationship is really strange.
Yeah. He
Um,
comes in a weird. Yeah. I don't know that it was ever really romantic for them. Like
yeah.
they were friends, and I think he would have liked maybe romantic, but I think that she was more focused on her restaurant. It seemed like,
Yeah,
but
so she kind of starts this weird situationship with this guy. And it dissolves very quickly into a very intense, manipulative and abusive relationship between her and this Shane person. And it he basically like scams her out of
millions,
millions, millions of doll
millions of
hairs,
dollars. Yeah,
okay? So much money,
exactly.
through this, like, manipulative relationship he has with her. He basically starts telling her like, he starts off as saying that he's part of, like, Black Ops and all this kinda stuff, and that he
Right.
can't really tell her what he's doing, and that slowly kinda dissolves into, like, "Actually, I'm an ethereal human being," or, "I'm not a human being, I'm just an
Yeah.
ethereal, like, being."
Yeah. There's other things like other worldly type of things.
Yeah,
Like
he basically convinces her that he's some spirit, and if she just follows everything that he says,
right.
then she will also be eternal, like, she'll never die,
Right, and her dog.
and her dog who she adopted, and, like, loves to piece like, she loves that dog. That dog is, like,
Yeah,
the
it's like
center
a
of her
little
whole world.
child, it looks like to her.
So the whole documentary and the whole story kind of follows this storyline of I think she meets him in, like, 2011, 2010 or 2011. Up until 2020, she's in this, like, wild relationship with this man who basically is slowly like taking over her restaurant and getting her to like feed him money and
Yeah,
all this kind of stuff. And so the documentary is like interviewing a lot of the employees that worked for her, interviewing uh, this guy named Jeffrey Chodorow,
yeah,
who was like
he was
her
the one of
biggest.
the, like, what is it? Investors. He was a big
He was the
investor.
one he was
Yeah,
a restaurateur or
I think
whatever.
so,
He,
something
like
like that.
he deals with a lot of famous restaurants,
Yeah,
and he actually was the one who sold her the restaurant in the first place. Because originally it was he kind of owned it, and she and her boyfriend at the time, who was not Shane, it was somebody else,
yeah.
was
One
like
of the chefs that was working at the restaurant. Like,
yeah,
she started it with somebody else completely, and then it
yes.
wound up. Oh.
Like, hit myself in the face.
And it wound up, this other guy comes in later. Like, it started as a couple, 2 chefs that were really, really talented, and then they break up, and she buys out the restaurant through this other investor guy, right?
Yeah.
And then this other guy, Shane Anthony, whatever his name is, kinda
Yes.
weasels his way in to her life and her restaurant, her business, and her money.
Yes. And so we wanted to talk about this documentary this week because as I was watching it and as I got mom to watch it, I realized that like this is such a good um way to talk about manipulation, gaslighting, and abuse in relationships.
Somebody else, and so you can
Yeah.
watch it almost like a movie, but then relate to what happened to her. In,
Yeah.
in the story, like, as we were going, it was like, "Oh, shoot, I felt something like that. Oh, shoot, I've experienced something similar to that," or somebody has said that to me, or somebody those kind of things where you're all of a sudden taken in by somebody that you think, "Well, this doesn't really make sense," but you do it anyway.
Yeah.
So,
So just as like a trigger warning, we are going to be talking about manipulation, emotional
yeah,
abuse, a lot of gaslighting, and sorts of topics like that. So if that's going to be upsetting for you, don't worry about it. You don't have to watch it. I'll also put a warning in our little beginning title
yeah,
screen thing. But I also wanted to start verbally saying it because I haven't been saying it in the past couple of episodes, and I feel bad. So
right.
yes, so we both wrote notes because we watched it separately. So because of that, I'm sure we noticed kind of different things.
Okay.
So yes, this guy's name, this like abusive partner, um, he says his name is Shane. He says his name is Shane Fox when he first meets Sarma, the main woman. You go through the story, you realize that he gave her a fake name, and his real name is Anthony.
Right.
And not only is his real name Anthony, but he's been to jail before, which he never
Right.
disclosed.
Which, by the way, is the first red flag. The A different
First,
name,
yeah.
like one of the first red flags being that he gave her the wrong name in order to mislead her. That was the first one of the first big things. Like, that sometimes
Yeah.
the guys can, or guys or women, doesn't matter whether it's a guy or a woman, can explain away for some reason, and you believe them, even though that is kind of weird. Not to say, hey, this is my real name, and that's kind of weird. Why wouldn't you? Yeah,
That's more than kind of
it's
weird. That
just
is so
it's just
sketchy.
weird. Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't you not give your name?
Yeah.
If, even if you don't like the person, why wouldn't you give the name?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, there's another character that I just want to mention really quick. His name is Will Richards, and this is the supposed IT guy who takes care of all the private banking and online security for Shane or Anthony. We'll probably switch back and forth between calling him that.
they
I'll
kind of
probably
do, because some people know him as Shane and
and
some
some
people
people
know him as Anthony.
and
So,
later on somebody else knows him as Chris.
Chris,
So like
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
he's got a lot he goes by a lot of aliases and a lot of
Yeah,
different things. But anyway, Will Richards is this supposed IT guy who is keeping all of Shane's like security online because supposedly he's, doing all
mhm,
um these really important black ops missions and he
right.
needs to keep all of his stuff safe.
Oh, yeah,
So
encrypted and all that.
yeah, so eventually Sarma and Shane get married, and now Will Richards has both all of Sarma's like personal banking information, all of her stuff,
Mhm.
and also all of Shane's stuff. And he like keeps track of it
Maybe.
all.
Do we say he says he has? I
Yeah.
still don't understand that, how they can do all those things without any cash money in their hand. Like, how are they doing all that? It's hard to imagine.
Don't know.
Anyway.
So, you know what? I'm just gonna say I was gonna wait until later to say it, but whatever. If you see it, you'll know. The IT guy is Shane.
Yeah.
He
He's just
makes up another guy whose name is Will to
gives him a whole ass
gives
personality.
him a whole personality, a whole, like, different life, and basically says, like,
Exactly.
that he's, like, that Will takes care of all of his, like, online stuff, but in reality, it's Shane, and all that Shane did was pretend like his IT guy had all of Sarma's personal banking information, and he had no access to
Just to
it.
make her comfortable, so she would give all that information to this other guy that wasn't another
That
guy.
wasn't another guy, it was
Right.
still him, and so throughout one of the things that I noticed, and actually this is one of my first, like, notes, so I wanted to say this, was that she said that one of the things that made her feel really like maybe the things that he was saying, like being an ethereal being, being um like somebody different and otherworldly, was that he would always know where she was and what she was doing.
Right.
And she was like, "Oh my gosh. He's like so like
Like,
godly. He's
intuitive, or
omniscient."
yeah, he knows, like, he's psychic too, and so
Yeah.
he
And
has
so
these powers, and so it kind of made sense to her because how would he know all that
right.
stuff?
And until later, she doesn't realize that she was like, this will person didn't exist. And so he just had access to all of her information all the time. So he
Exactly.
could get her
Without her knowing.
location.
She had no idea, yeah,
Right. So he could easily like track her location, know where she was.
exactly.
Oh, now I was the one who was like holding the mic the wrong way.
Yeah.
um, he had all this information on her. So yeah. Um, so as we're kind of talking about this topic of like manipulation and gaslighting and stuff, I think one of the things that I wanted to bring up um was something that I noticed that I didn't notice the first time I watched it through, but the second time I did, um, is that these people that are so manipulative and that are, I mean, in his case, he's a scam artist, but
Right.
just these like manipulative, kind of abusive people, they target a very specific kind of person.
It's true.
And I feel like Sarma was that person. And I wrote here that Sarma was always passive. Even as a child, she had her parents speak for her. He even said, like, when she was going into college, she said, like, "Oh, I don't know what I want to do. Everybody else is doing banking, so I guess I'll go into banking."
Right.
And then when her boss was like, "Hey, it doesn't seem like you actually like banking. Do you want to continue banking?" She was like, "I don't know. Do you like it?"
Ugh,
So from
yeah.
the beginning,
She was pliable. Like she was really suggestible, I guess is a better word.
she was very easily swayed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And literally, she would have never gotten into food except that her boss at this investment banking place was like, "You seem like you're really into food. Like maybe you should try that." And she was like, "Okay."
So she went to chef school or
She
whatever.
went to culinary
Culinary
school.
school. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I noticed something that made her a really, and this is again, this is not her fault. I'm just saying that like this is something that I noticed that I think is really something that like abusive partners and
Yeah.
manipulative people tend to look for, which is somebody who's very like easily swayed,
Right.
um
Easily
very
convinced, kind of passive,
very
maybe.
or just very open,
Yeah.
like very
Yeah.
open to
Yeah.
different experiences, different thought process, different ways of thinking, and isn't one to push back.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't like to make waves or anything like that. And once again, we're doing the using her story to get to the meat of the conversation, which is the manipulation and all that kind of stuff that is apparent in there, and how you feel, and you really go back and forth between thinking that she knows or she doesn't know, because
Right.
he's good at it and buys in so completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely a very like when I realized that, it gave me a different perspective on the entire story because I was like, "Oh man, like from the beginning, like she just naturally has a personality that's
Yeah.
a little bit more like she's willing to take suggestions, she's more like easily like swayed by people." And so already like she's kind of a target for somebody who wants to scam or wants to manipulate. What was one of your first notes?
One of my first notes. Well, I was looking at, that's interesting, was why we're doing this whole thing. coming from my generation or coming from a mom perspective or whatever, the first thing that I noticed was that she was on the rebound. That she was on the rebound from that other guy that she had started the restaurant with. So not only was she passive and suggestible, but she was also in a lot of pain. She was in a lot of like emotional pain, and she was by herself trying to manage this $1 million restaurant that she had just bought out for $2 million worth of debt, which is really upsetting already. And then she's sad on top of it. So he could hone in on all those feelings, and she was even more susceptible to that because her heart was broken. So she was kind of lonely, looking for somebody to kind of fit that place. And that was when it just stuck out to me when I watched it the second time.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
we
well,
forget about that healing process that happens when you break up with somebody, whether it's a friend or boyfriend or husband or anything. You need that time in between to heal your heart and be able to stand on your own 2 feet again, emotionally.
yeah, well, and she also said that one of the things that kind of swept her off her feet with this Shane person was that he was like kind of a big and more burly man,
Yeah.
and he was very protective. And I think that she felt like that was something that she needed because she was in a very lonely place. She had a lot of issues happening with like debt, and she was very afraid and very
Yeah. Yeah.
lonely. And so because of that, I think that like was also a piece that made her more willing to go into something with him. Another thing that I said, I wrote this in all caps because it really freaked me out.
You're
Um,
yelling,
yeah, I know,
Ellie.
as I normally do.
Well, you rant for
It's true,
sure.
yeah. I said that there was only one time that she ever said that she actually felt love for him. So she has this moment when they're, more newer to dating and
Yeah.
stuff. And she talks about this moment she has where she's in a restaurant with him and she said, and this is the only time she ever said it, she never talked about feeling this way again. She was like, I think like when I was sitting there with him in this like hotel lobby or restaurant or whatever, I felt what I could only describe as like love for him. And so I told him that. And she said that she like basically just told him that she loved him in that moment. And then ev- after that, like again, their relationship was like 9 years long.
Yeah.
He just kept reminding her whenever it felt like she was starting to question what he was doing or starting to question like what was going on.
Hmm.
He would say like, "Remember how you felt at the restaurant?
Right.
Remember when you
That's right.
said
He would
like."
flash her back to that moment. So she would kind of relive that and go, "Oh yeah, I do love you."
Right, which is
Yeah.
another really manipulative tactic
Yeah.
to use the time where things were good in order to try and remind like this poor, this victim of like but remember this is how you actually feel. Like you're mad at me right now, but this is how you
This is how you
actually
actually feel.
feel.
This is the reality of it too. Well, and he also used it aggressively against her. He would in an argument, he would say, "You told me you love me." And so and like question her authenticity, I suppose, was saying and she didn't want that. Like in the moment she did feel that way. And so then kind of uses that against her almost in an aggressive way.
Yeah, he did. He would like we kind of talked about this part of it which again is like he would like he would love bomb her.
Right.
He would like give like and just for clarification, like love bombing is like you give somebody an intense amount of like compliments,
Yeah.
like really loving, very like intensely emotional and very
Buy them
flattering.
gifts and flatter, yeah.
Yeah, and he would tell her she's perfect, she's the only one for him. He
Right.
found his like eternal love or whatever. And then when she would start to question him, he would blow up
Right.
and get really, really angry and be
Right.
like, "You wanted this, like,
You
you're the
said you were
one
in, yeah.
you said you were in," and he would tell her that all this money that she was wiring to him all the time, was just a test, and he was trying to convince her that if she truly believed in him, then she would give him all this money because in reality, like, if she's an eternal being, money doesn't actually mean anything.
Right. It doesn't. And if you're attached to it, then you're not one of an ethereal being because you're attached to money. Then you're worldly, right? Or something like that.
Kinda, yeah, or that
Yes.
was, like, the basics of what he
Yeah.
was saying, which
Accusing
again.
her of being holding on to money or valuing money too much, I guess. Accusing
Right.
her of that. Yeah,
Yeah, and just gaslighting her by trying to convince her that, like, because she didn't want to give up all this money that she was trying to use for her
right.
restaurant and trying to use for her business, he was trying to convince her that she didn't give all that up, then she must, I mean, and basically, she must hate him. She must not care about him.
Right, or she was lying, like,
Right.
that accusation in there, because she knows she wasn't lying in that moment, but he's accusing her of lying now, and she doesn't wanna be a liar, you know?
Right, and so he'd be like, "Well, you don't actually love me or you
Right.
don't actually care about me." And she's sitting there going, I do. I just don't feel like I can give you $100,000 again." And he's like, "Well, you don't actually love me." And like again,
You love your money, yeah, exactly.
that's where that gaslighting
Yeah,
comes in of trying to convince somebody that they don't feel the way they feel
right.
or they're not doing the things that they're doing, um, in order to get them to be under their control, basically.
I think so, yeah, under the control.
I know this is a very sensitive topic, and it's something that we're definitely we'll try and tread as lightly as we can on
Right.
because I've definitely been in situations that are kind of similar,
And I have
and I know
very
you
much so.
definitely
Yeah,
have.
definitely have. So it's not we're never in no way making fun of any of this stuff because it's we're talking about it because it's really serious.
Yeah.
And it's really agonizing when you go through it and when you experience it and when people then question why you would be so stupid.
Yeah, because
Like that's all of it's hurtful. Like,
I think that was a huge part of it too, is
mhm,
that you could hear sometimes when the interviewer is talking to her, he would ask her questions and she would get really
yeah.
defensive about like because he would say something like, well, why didn't you tell anybody that this was happening to you? And she was like, what was I supposed to say?
Yeah,
My husband kind of is like telling me that he's an ethereal being and I think I'm being abused, but I don't know if I am. And
right.
like,
What do you
how are you
say?
supposed to tell? Like, I don't, that would be so hard. Like, how in depth and how intense it got and how crazy the
Mhm.
story got. There's no way that you could tell somebody that story
No.
and
Well,
them
he had her
actually
so
like,
off balance that she kept questioning herself, what her own sanity, and so her own ability to judge. So he was looking to him, and which is what he did. He made sure that she was reliant on him to kind of tell her what was true and what was not true.
she was questioning herself. He also was isolating her
Right.
from all of the employees and all of the
Her friends and her
her
family.
friends,
Yeah.
anybody, even Leon, even her dog.
Yeah.
He was trying to keep her like separate from like she would have to travel all these crazy places to keep her safe because he said that like somebody was after her. He said that his brother was after her.
Right. Something. Yeah.
Um and he
Weird.
he called his brother like this kind of like omniscient sort of godly being that could see everything, and so he would say like, "Oh, he's watching you. You have to go to Rome. You have to go to Italy."
Right.
And she would just go and because she believed him, and she would have to leave her dog with other people for a long time and that kind of stuff. So he was trying to isolate her from anybody that could convince her that even her dog, because the love for her dog might convince her to like not do certain things if he was maybe abusive towards the dog or
Right.
anything, but he always like acted like he loved the dog so much
Hmm.
and like he was so on her side and
Right.
that he would make Leon this pit bull live forever. Anyway, so it was like he knew what he could and couldn't step on, but he even isolated her from the dog to make her feel as lonely as possible
Exactly.
so that the only voice she would hear from is his.
Exactly.
And he said at one point in the story, he talked about how he convinced her that he knew just by looking at somebody whether somebody was good or bad.
Right.
He called them red shirts and blue shirts. And
I
he would
forgot about
tell
that.
her,
Hmm.
yeah, he would tell her that some of the employees in her restaurant were bad and
Right.
some of them were good. And I think that was another way that he was trying to get her to be convinced that the only one she can actually trust is him.
Right. Well, and those employees were probably the ones that were questioning him, that were saying, "What is he doing in here? Like, why is he here?" Or asking her why she was believing in him that it didn't make sense or something like that. And all of a sudden, boom, they're fired.
Mhm.
You know, because they are bad people,
Yeah,
or
or
not even necessarily fired, but she's not around them or something.
I mean, yeah, I don't even think she necessarily ever fired anyone. At least she didn't talk about it.
The one guy she did fire, the one he was kind of a manager guy or whatever, and he was said, "I think you're stealing from us," and she didn't, so she fired him right off the bat.
Oh, I
Remember?
guess I don't remember that part.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of the main guys that was talking, one of the main, um,
Was it
manager
the
type people in the restaurant or whatever,
Oh,
and he had
okay.
called her, and this was towards the very end when they
Oh.
were, I think she was in Rome or wherever she was, and this had gone on long enough. They weren't getting their paychecks. They were, it was all falling apart. And he said, "I think you're stealing from me." And she was like, "Okay, you're fired."
Oh, okay, okay. I don't really remember that part. But
Yeah,
yeah, Shane, Anthony, whatever, started slowly taking over her business because again, in her absence, like he has the ability to come in because the employees know that he's close to Sarma.
right,
They know that like he's a guy that she trusts, even if they don't necessarily trust him. And so when he comes in and starts kind of putting his foot in things, like putting his foot in the business, saying what they're going to do and what they're not going to do and how they're going to run the business, Sarma's not around to say no.
right,
And I mean, she's not even around to like defend anything. So,
exactly,
and so he can just say, like, oh, well, Sarma said that this is what she wants for the restaurant or whatever. When in reality, all he's really doing is trying to figure out how to put more money in his pocket.
exactly, exactly, and to get, yeah, to make it look like he's legit,
Yeah.
no matter what.
Do you have other notes?
Yeah, I do.
What's another one that you noticed?
Well, I noticed, and this was a biggie because I've kind of experienced this in my life or whatever. That she lied, like right from the very very beginning. She told people that he was somebody else to her. She said she said,
Forgot
"Oh,
about
he's
that.
my brother. He's my cousin. He's
He's somebody I
my
know from
somebody I know from
school.
school." Yeah, and she told different people different things. And I thought right off the bat, like she had that feeling inside that something was wrong. Like she wasn't proud of him. She wasn't proud of him as a boyfriend or even a friend. She was kind of trying, she was already ashamed. Like she already felt weird about his presence. And I thought that was really telling because you have that feeling inside and you almost feel like, well, they're not going to be around very long because they're kind of weird anyway. And I just felt like that was a biggie that, she already felt shame and she didn't even hardly know him.
Yeah, she already like what like wasn't being honest or straightforward
Right,
about any of it at
right,
all. And like
exactly.
they even said when again like when he suggested that they get married, which in the end like they somebody not even Shane, it was somebody else suggested, one of their bankers or
Yeah,
something suggested that Shane and Sarma get married in order to like help with their finances or
right.
whatever.
That Nate didn't have to transfer back and forth. They would be a married
Yeah.
couple. Yeah,
Right, and so Shane was like, "We're doing that," and then she was like, "Okay," and so, she didn't even tell anybody when they got married.
right. She
She
just,
just was
yes,
like, "Yeah, it happened,"
yeah,
and she wasn't even excited about it, and they even one of the employees even said that she asked her straight out because she would wear an extra ring, on her wedding ring finger
to kind of hide it.
to hide
Yeah.
her actual wedding
Yeah,
ring.
so she was already embarrassed because she already knew that something was didn't feel right, and then she already knew that people around her were saying something didn't feel right, and so she didn't want to deal with it. So she just hid it, like she was not talking about it at all, and then people couldn't confront her or couldn't make her feel bad about it or something.
He found all the things that he could play on
Right,
and use those things. Like they talked about also how um the kind of like new age veganism that she was into, a lot of people believe in like crystals and kind of like a like the universe and
right.
or I mean
Kind of a
believing in the universe
spirituality,
is
kind of
normal,
a
but
kind of a yeah, kind of a not
but
magic, but yeah, just more
yeah, not
spiritual,
magic, but like a
spiritually
weird
connected. Yeah,
spiritual like energy.
different other than like a Christian looking thing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you and I are specifically Christian,
right.
but yes, it's like it's not necessarily like a religious way of looking at things, but
Right.
it's
It's
more
more
of
of a
like a
universe kind of thing,
yeah, like
yeah.
the universe understands you and
Right. And
you
things all happen for a
whisper to your
reason and yeah,
crystals and yeah, that
exactly.
kind of stuff. And so she was like she like because she was so open to that way of thinking, um it was even easier for him to convince her that he was like some otherworldly
Right.
thing
Yeah.
because she was already kind of open to the idea of like, well, I don't really know what's going on out there. Like maybe
Yeah,
maybe
maybe
those
it's a
things happen.
possibility.
Um, so yeah, that was like I think as I was going through and listening to the documentary the second time, I was realizing like, oh man, there's a lot of fuel here that he could use to manipulate her. And if nothing else, like along with this just being a discussion of the signs of like manipulation and gaslighting and that kind of thing, heck, use it as a warning, like
Definitely.
this
There's
kind
so
of
many
stuff
warnings and
happens.
yeah, and that's why this is such a good example
Yeah.
of it is because that's what happens. But it's some on like usually in real life it happens when she was real life, I guess.
She was. It
But
was real.
it happens at a lower level all the time. And that's
Yeah.
what's so weird about it is like you can relate to her on some level no matter what it was.
Yeah, like, her story is incredibly, like,
It's
it's
traumatic.
it's
Yeah, it's
really
huge.
wild,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I did find myself relating to a lot of different parts of her
Mhm.
story, like, especially when she was talking about, being so isolated. She talked about being, like, she would be going from hotel to hotel, um, all the time. Even if she was staying in New York, even if she was in the city where she already had her own place,
Right.
he would still make her stay in hotels and other places because it, like, wasn't safe, and he was protecting her,
Mhm.
um, but, like, he would just keep her as far away from people that she loved as possible. And I really relate to that because I have definitely been in a relation actually a couple different relationships where it felt like they were trying their best to isolate me from all of the other influences in my life,
Right.
um, and all the other people that might have a different opinion.
Mhm. And might
Um,
tell you that.
yeah, and
Give
might be
you
like,
their
"Hey, this
opinion.
guy's kinda
Something's
weird,"
yep.
or
Yeah.
like, "This guy, I don't really agree with the way that
Right.
he operates," or whatever. And I remember, specifically in one of the relationships that I was in where that was a thing, like, where I was kinda being isolated by this person. I remember I finally got up the courage because, one of my brother's friends asked me, um, like, "Oh, how's this, relationship going?" or whatever, and I
Mhm.
finally got up the courage to just be like, "These are some of the things that I'm experiencing," and he was like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
And he kind of put my feet back on the ground and was like, "Hold on." Like,
Yeah.
he was like, like, I love you, and, this guy that you're dating, like, I'm friends with him, but he's not if
This
that's
is
how
a
he's
nut. Yeah,
treating
this is
you."
nutty. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's how he's treating you, like, I think you need to second guess all of this and think about this. And that was kind of one of the first things that made me realize, like, "Oh."
Right.
And then, I had other really good friends in my life who actually held an intervention to,
That's right. Right.
yeah,
As a group, right?
as a group,
Yeah.
yeah, yep, as a
Yeah.
group got me in a room and was just like, "This is unhealthy,
Yeah.
and you need to get out of this."
Yeah.
And that was, oh my gosh, I can't even, like, I'm so thankful for that,
Yeah. Well, they loved you enough to tell you the truth.
right,
Yeah.
but while I was in this relationship, like, I was, um, so isolated, and I was trying so hard not to interact with them because the person I was dating, like,
Didn't like them or didn't
didn't
want you
like
around them.
them,
Didn't,
thought
yeah.
that they were not the greatest people,
Exactly.
gave me all these reasons why maybe it was a bad idea to be close to them. Um,
Or told you that they were like doing something that wasn't good to you, like presenting them as if they were not treating you right. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like accusing, because that's what the relationship I was in, that was what happened. It was like, "Your mom tells you things that, are so hurtful to you, you should not let her talk to you like that," to make me question my own relationship with my mom or my dad, and, like, as if there's something I didn't see that he saw, and it kind of pushes you away from them because 'cause you're thinking, "Well, I guess I do kind of feel that way," and, you sort of buy in because you do have hurt. Everybody has hurt. You have hurt. I have hurt. From our childhoods, we all do, and so you kind of it's hard not to let them kind of sway you that way, like, "Oh, yeah, my mom did do that, and it was hard, and okay, he's sticking up for me," and that's was always my thing. He loves me so much, he'll stick up for me. He'll like, he wants me to doesn't want anybody treating me badly. That's what it looks like from the outside.
right, yeah. Well, and that's such an issue because, like, there's nothing more dangerous than half truths,
Oh my
where
gosh,
it's
yeah.
like he like I remember specifically in the relationship that I'm talking about. um he would say things that weren't entirely untrue about the person.
Right.
Like, "Oh, well, they seem to have kind of a temper," or "They seem to be kind of, like, overly sensitive."
Mhm.
And it's like, well, yes, they do. But he would say it in a way where it was like, So you shouldn't be friends with them," or
Right,
or they're using that as a way to, like, manipulate
right.
you,
It's harmful
or
to you in some kind of way, yeah.
yeah, or they're doing that, they're hurting you that way. And it's like, no, I can have friends that maybe have a little bit of a temper, who are a little bit overly sensitive, and that doesn't mean that they're using it against me or something. Like, everybody
Right,
has their flaws.
right, exactly. Yeah, we all are imperfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have
What else?
other
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna ask you if you had
Oh,
other
well,
notes. I was
I
gonna say I have
just
a lot.
noticed in the beginning that, that and this is in the very, very beginning, and men and women, when you first start into a relationship, you really have to have your feelers up, because she saw him at a picture and had been talking to him. She liked his picture, but when he presented himself in person, he already looked really different than he did in the, like, it wasn't, he wasn't, he already presented himself different than he was. He wasn't he And that's in the very beginning. When you go like, "Oh, I saw this picture and I liked what that looked like, and now here he is and he looks really different. I'm not sure I like the way he looks or is or something like that." But then all the excuses that go with, "Oh, this is why," and you buy into it. But I mean, wouldn't you, looking back in hindsight, like, I wish that I would have done like, well, what happened that made you like gain all that weight, or what happened that made you lose all that weight, or what happened that, I mean, you would, wouldn't you kind of be interested to find out, like, if it's a dramatic difference, like, well, something probably happened. It could be losing weight too. It doesn't have to be. I mean, it could be anything. Could be a really big haircut. People like you get emotional and you chop off all your hair.
Me.
I know.
Um,
I've done it. Colored my hair.
you get emotional and then you have bangs.
Yeah. Or you have bangs, or you have, yeah, something.
Yeah.
Mohawk.
Well, I mean, I can kind of understand not like walking up to somebody and being like, "Wow, you're so much fatter than you were."
But
Like, I
no,
don't think that's
no, but
appropriate.
I don't think you would even necessarily have to say anything. But in your mind, wouldn't you be thinking like, this is kind of odd?
Oh, yeah, 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 and she did, and I think
Right.
that's so true, like, yeah, you do like, he doesn't look like his pictures, like,
I
obviously,
know.
like,
I wouldn't go on it. You're so much fatter. That's
"Wow,
not how I meant.
what happened to you?"
I
Like,
know. You've been
I
eating that
don't
at Burger King.
yeah, I don't think that that's appropriate at all.
No, they look different. They, they say
Yeah,
one thing and they look very different.
right, well, yeah, if somebody doesn't look like their pictures when you meet up with them in person,
Yeah.
I already would be questioning, like, "What are you hiding?" Or, like,
Yeah.
"Why did you feel like you needed to hide that?"
That's what I
Like,
mean. Why weren't you proud of who you are?
which and I mean,
Yeah.
okay, to be fair, there are a lot of people that are very insecure,
True.
and I totally understand that. But I think that or who are very insecure, who are worried about people thinking of them a certain way. So
Yeah.
I actually
Didn't
do
want them to
understand that.
prejudge. And yeah, I do understand.
So
Yeah, I do
but you
understand
know
that.
what? That's the thing though is that like that one was one that even you and I can sit here and be like, "Well, I kind of get why he might not have."
Yeah, we're already rationalizing it, but she kind of indicated that he was like a Marine type military guy that was, really strong and really fit and really in shape, and she thought that was really attractive. And he showed up as this kind of very different, not in shape, a lot heavier, a lot less well kept, not as well dressed, all the things, like, he changed. Big He didn't look at all like that.
Well, and the
But
interesting part of that too is that she was saying like, "How shallow of me to think that way." Like,
right, and she was, yeah, and that's what we do. We say, "Oh, I should give them the benefit of the doubt. I shouldn't be judgy. I shouldn't, how I'm imperfect, so I shouldn't be judgy to somebody else." And I don't think it's judgy. It's just like taking into consideration the things that don't make sense, or
yeah,
that, or the things that they tell you that are untruths that are masked. You know,
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's that was a really big one. Yeah, I mean, off the bat, he
yeah.
presented himself much different than he actually
'Cause she's
was.
really fit and she's really healthy and she's a vegan and
Oh, that was
very
the other
beautiful.
interesting
Yeah,
too. That was kind of interesting to me that she even was dating somebody who wasn't
yeah,
also like vegan or wasn't also like or at least like kind of a food connoisseur sort of
right,
person. Not that she has to date somebody like that, but it was really interesting to me that she was so passionate about this like raw veganism and
right.
he came in and he's like eating Domino's
Yeah,
and like
burgers and stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah, and like they
yeah.
talked about how he would like go to Subway every day and get these like tuna sandwiches and stuff.
Extra mayo.
Yeah, like, all this
Yeah.
kinda stuff that was, like I mean, that's fine if you wanna do that, but it's so interesting to me that, that with her lifestyle and the way that she wanted to, like, live and what she
Yeah,
believed in, that she was so willing
yeah,
to be with somebody that was the complete opposite of her, but I
yeah.
think, again, that, like, that shows how much control he had over her, where she was, like, so, um she was so invested in the relationship that even some of the things that for her, like, it's like, "Oh, you don't really fit into my lifestyle or the way that I wanna live my life," like, even that wasn't a consideration.
Right. Well, but it goes back to that, the idea that, like, we tell ourselves we're being judgy. Like, I shouldn't judge his character on what he eats, whether he eats at Subway or anywhere
Which
else,
is true.
which is true, and you shouldn't judge that way and stuff. But I think that when somebody when you wanna be with somebody or consider being with them for as a partner or even a spouse or whatever like that, you do have to consider what is your daily life gonna look like if with somebody who thinks not that they're wrong, but that they think completely opposite of you or very different from you. Like, that just is that's a hard road to walk if you have believe in something. Like, if you she believes in veganism, she believed in that, and he didn't. That's a really core belief, I think, that those things do make relationships hard if you ignore that kind of stuff.
They
Being a
do, yeah.
Christian versus not being a Christian. There's nothing wrong with not being a Christian, but when you want to walk on a daily basis in a Christian lifestyle, it does make a difference.
No, that's true,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
It's
does.
very true,
Mhm.
and you have
And
2
that's
completely
okay.
different
That's okay.
yeah, and you have 2 completely different belief systems, but I
Right.
think what happened with her was that it was just, like I mean, to be honest with you, him not being vegan was, like, the least of her, like,
Totally.
worries,
Totally.
but I think that again, it's like she got so swept up in everything that he said and all he talked about and all the
Mhm.
love bombing and all of the
Yep.
crazy stuff that he, made her a part of so fast. Like, they got married so
Yeah.
fast, they were, like, together
Another
so
red
fast.
flag.
Yep,
Another red flag when somebody wants to marry you after, say, 2 months, 3 months, or right from the very beginning when they say, "Oh, we're soulmates, we're meant for each other
yep, watch
forever,"
that.
and all this kind of stuff, and they're so willing to jump so quickly because if they truly love you, what is the problem with taking it slowly? If you love each other, there is no problem with it. But why all of a sudden have to be legally married? Why in 3 months do you have to be legally married?
Especially
Yeah.
when he's, like, constantly asking her for money, and then he
Mhm.
suggests that they should get married.
In order so he can share her funds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just the whole that
All of it.
whole concept is so wild. It's like, again, that manipulation and that, like, um, that abuse just runs really deep
Yeah.
of wanting somebody, to give up everything and putting them in such a vulnerable spot where he has complete control over her, even when she's saying, like, "No, he doesn't," like, even when she's mad
Yeah.
enough towards the end because in the end, she ends up going to jail based on the things that he did to her.
Right.
And I'm not saying that she never did anything wrong throughout this entire process. I'm sure there were things that she
Well,
didn't do well, but
in the end, it goes along with the whole when you're an accomplice. The unfortunate part about the law is that they don't say, oh, very often take into consideration that people are manipulated like that. That's not really part of the law. The law,
right.
I mean, the bottom line is she was there and she was embezzling money.
Yep.
But even though that wasn't her choice and she thought it was something very different, it's like I sat in the car while somebody murdered somebody.
Right.
It's not your fault. You didn't do it or whatever, but you do have to. It's the whole thing. When your parents say, watch the company that you keep, because unfortunately the law is not written to consider manipulation and abuse and stuff like that. The law is the law.
Right.
You were there. You watched it happen. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, you're a part of this now.
Yeah, exactly. It's
And
very scary. That's very scary.
yeah, and it's so crazy because even as she's like, she actually it's at the very beginning of the documentary, but um It the documentary kinda goes in a way where it's like it shows you the end and then shows you the beginning sort
Right,
of,
right.
and, so she's gonna go to jail for, like, 3 months for things that he basically made her an accomplice to.
Which she would have been a lot more. I mean, if there was a trial, she probably would have gone away for 10 years, 15
Yeah,
years
I'm sure there would've
because
been a
of the
lot more.
amount of money that they were talking about.
Because
But
in
she
the end, like,
pled guilty. Yeah.
her employees weren't being paid, and it was a
Yeah.
whole thing, talking about how she's going away to jail and all this kinda stuff, and then they play back this recording that she took of a phone call that she literally called him, like, while she was on the set of this documentary and was like, "I'm doing this documentary," and he was like he got really mad, and then he got really quiet, and he said, "I think you know 2 things. First of all, that I love you." And then he starts going into this thing about, like, and whether that's convenient for you or not, or whether you do or don't or whatever, like, no matter what you think, I still love you.
Yeah.
And then he goes into his second reason, and he basically, like, completely just tells her she's really dumb and,
Yeah.
like
Well, and he's not somebody to be messed with. So
and
he
he's not
kind of
somebody to be
threatened.
messed
He
with. He
kind of,
kinda
yeah.
threatens her.
Yeah.
You're just listening to, like, all of this, like, gaslighting and this manipulative, like, he tried to, like, disarm her by saying, like, "First of all, I love you,
Hmm.
and even though
Which
I'm about
is,
to get
yeah,
real emotional,
exactly.
you gotta know that it's because I love you. It's not because I'm trying to, manipulate you and all this stuff."
Right, right.
Um, there was too one other thing that I wanted to talk about,
Hmm.
and I wanted to know your opinion because I don't think they ever tell you. He Shane, at one point, tells Sarma that, it that it's really a bad idea to talk about any of the things that are going on with, like, all this wiring of money and all of
Hmm.
this, like, all these things that she has to do to prove herself, that it's a really bad idea for her to say any of these things out loud or talk to him just like blatantly. So he talks about going in the box. And going in the box is basically a term that he uses um, to say that he would like go and do something, go and establish some sort of like magical boundary
Right.
so that they could talk openly and freely, like in her apartment or something, about what was going on. So he would come to her at random times and be like, okay, we're in the box, like we're allowed to talk freely. And first of all, that in and of itself is another way of like keeping her from telling anybody else what's going
Right.
on
Right.
because he's making her believe that all these
Everybody's listening.
dangerous
They're listening. Yeah.
people, dangerous beings are all like in on their conversation. But one thing that I noticed though, and they never, I don't feel like they ever gave a resolve to this. It's that they said, or it says he would tell her they were in the box, meaning that he did something to make it so that they couldn't hear the conversation that was going to happen between the two. One time he said that after coming out of the bathroom, and when she went into the bathroom, there was blood in the sink. What happened?
Oh, that's I. Oh, yeah. I don't know about that.
And there was
I remember
another.
that, and I remember thinking like, what I thought. Well, did he do it like a what are they ceremony of some sort,
I have no idea.
or what? Or
And there was one other time, so her office was actually in her apartment. So some of the employees, like the managers and stuff,
mhm,
would actually have open access to her apartment in order to work in that office or in
right,
order to get things from her office. And one of the employees said that one time they went in there, they walked into her apartment, the cabinet was smashed and there was blood on the floor.
right,
And so they took a picture of it and sent it to Sarma and was like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And she like dodged it completely.
yeah,
But they never address what happened. Like
right.
they never address like
Whether
how
was that
well,
did he
it
hurt her?
freaks me
I
out.
know. Whether did he hurt her or did he do something to make it look like it almost implies that he hurt her in some kind of way.
That one's it seems like it implies that maybe she was being also physically abused, which
Mm,
is so awful and
right.
like something that
There
I
isn't,
couldn't
yeah,
even imagine.
anything worse. Either that or what was going through my mind was that he was doing something to himself to make it look like she was doing something to him. Like,
Mm,
or that maybe like that she was in some way hurting him. You know what I mean? Like to set up a stage for being able to get out of it.
mhm.
I don't
Maybe,
know.
but he wanted her under his
He
control, so I
did.
don't think he would wanna, like, frame her as, like, a like, "Oh, she's abusing me."
But if he said you can go to jail for abusing me, he still got her under his control because he's calling the shot. He's saying like, I will tell the police, hypothetically speaking, I will tell the police that you cut me
Mm.
and then you go to jail. Like they set you up so they still have control even though it's going the other direction.
Right, yeah. I don't know, but they never explained
Yeah,
it, so
they never did.
I wanted to say that, like, this documentary is really wild and it's a really good watch. So if you haven't watched it, I definitely would as long as you're comfortable with the topics
The
because it
topics, yeah.
does go very deep into like um a lot of the phone calls between him and her are recorded and so they play them back and there's a lot of yelling and a lot of really intense like there were parts where I had to kind of like step back for a minute because
Yeah.
he was really intense with her and would say really awful things and he basically convinced her that if she didn't do what he wanted then he would die. He would
Right.
get killed.
Right.
And so he made it as if it was her fault. And if she didn't go through with it, it wasn't like, oh, okay, you don't go through with it and nothing bad happens. A couple of bad things happen. First of all, this love of your life or whatever gets killed.
Right.
And second of all, he also said that she would lose everything.
Right.
Like he convinced her that if he dies, like if she doesn't do what he says, not only does he die, but also like Leon would die and then like her restaurant would close and all
Right.
these crazy
So she would
things.
lose everything. So she was still just enough probably scared of that she was believing things still.
Yeah.
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 It's crazy.
It is a wild ride.
Yeah.
But such it just fueled this topic of like, man, the warning signs in a manipulative
Yeah.
relationship, one where there's a lot of gaslighting and a lot of like control happening is something to really be careful of and to
Yeah.
really watch out for and make sure like in any relationship that, and it could be a friendship too, because
Yeah,
this,
and it could be
I mean,
man,
there
woman,
wasn't really
doesn't
anything
matter. Yeah,
romantic happening with these 2, it was more of, like, a glorified friendship,
it really was.
and,
And finance, like business too.
almost like
Yeah, yeah,
business, yeah, but they were married. In any kind of relationship, like, make sure you're talking to people in your life that you trust about the people that you
right.
meet and that you decide to be close to, like, always have your escape plans and your ways of getting out of in like, potentially dangerous situations, like
Mhm.
first dates and stuff like that, like, be looking for those things because it's so easy to overlook them when somebody comes in that hot.
Yeah, and they come in, they sweep you off your feet, and you feel so good and stuff like that. And I think too, this another thing to keep in mind in the beginning of relationships, like in hindsight, I look back at this, is that you have kind of a feeling like something maybe is a little bit off. Um, but and your friends say that, like all of my friends around me kept saying, I don't know, like I don't think he's good and everything. And of course, I'm somebody who makes my own decisions. So in my mind, I'm thinking I'll make my own decision,
Me.
and I'm not going to necessarily listen to what they say about somebody that I think I might like or whatever. But if everybody except you is saying is saying that this guy doesn't look quite right, or he's not, what he's saying doesn't make a lot of sense or whatever, you really need to do your diligence, especially this day and age, to make sure that you find out they couldn't find any background on the guy. Like, remember, they were looking for him. They couldn't find anything on him except for what he did under one name or under something else. But they were like, well, we can't find somebody in Black Ops. I mean, what are we going to look him up on the internet?
Well,
So
yeah,
he
they
was kind of not. Everybody has social media. Everybody can be found. Why couldn't he be found?
Well, that was the problem though, is that he did have social media, but when they looked online, he had like 50,000 followers, so he had a lot of people
So
that
he
followed
set it up
him.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah, so he looked very normal on
Hmm.
social media. He wasn't hiding. He was friends with Alec Baldwin on and was like tweeting him all the time. Like
Right.
he looked very legit.
Yeah, he did.
So that wasn't really the problem, but the problem was is that he never said that Shane Fox wasn't his real name.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that when he called the restaurant and they looked at the caller ID, it said Anthony, I can't remember the last name, but
Strangeness,
Stranges. Um,
which is kind of weird
yeah,
in and of itself.
kind of ironic. Like, oh my gosh, this is him. And they looked it up, and all they found was his mug shot.
Right.
So, like, it's kind of he set himself up really well as long as you didn't look into it.
Right. Yeah.
And
Which is why he didn't want her to listen to her friends, because then they
right,
were going to push her to look into it a little bit deeper, and
and
then he
his
didn't want
facade
that.
falls apart really fast if you look into it. And so I think that's something that's like, again, like not to be paranoid or
Not at
anything like
all.
that, but to really be thinking very remember when you're walking into a situation like what you're looking for in a relationship, what you will and will not tolerate, and be really open with being able to say those things because there were I can't remember who it was. I can't remember which person it was in the documentary, but somebody said like oh, I met Shane and I wasn't a big fan of how he did X, Y, and Z. And he
Mhm.
knew that, so he didn't really talk to me much. Like he knew that he couldn't convince I can't remember which person it was, but somebody that worked there. He couldn't convince them, he couldn't like charm them or
Right.
convince
They
them
weren't
of anything.
susceptible
So
to
he just
his
left them
charm.
alone.
Hmm.
I think that kept him away because it kept Shane away because
Hmm.
he was like I can't fool this person, so I'm just gonna keep them out of the
Right.
picture. So yeah, so just keep in mind, like, be really strong in what you believe in and don't let somebody manipulate
Yeah.
you into
Listen
thinking
to
that
your intuition. I think that
yeah,
intuition, we always ignore it because there's always a justification for why somebody might do something, and there usually is good reasons for most. I would say in the majority of just regular old situations that things happen, things get mistaken, something is wrong or something like that. But when that intuition keeps nagging at you, keeps saying like, this doesn't really make sense though. Don't override that intuition. Like, really do look into making sure that the person that you're in front of is the person that they say they are.
yeah,
It's just so easy anymore to hide who you really are
yeah. Well,
beneath
yeah,
stuff.
just get other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Like if you're dating somebody or even if you're friends with somebody and you guys have like a big fight or something, like and you're not sure about it, like get other people's opinions. Like you don't have to gossip,
No, not at all.
but being able to be like, hey, this is what happened. It does this seem right? Like this feels kind of wrong to
Yeah,
me.
exactly.
And just find people that you can trust with that kind of
Hmm.
information and
Hmm.
be willing to say like, okay, this person is not safe and to
Right.
walk away.
Right.
She had a really big support system around her.
She did in the
Um
beginning. Yeah.
yeah, and and none of it is her fault for being manipulated or whatever,
No, not
but
at all.
she did have a huge support system around her, and it really is so sad when all these people that really loved her are talking about, like, if she would have just come to me, like, I would have tried my hardest to, like,
Exactly.
give her a safe space and, like, find somewhere for her to go and all that kind of stuff. So
So true.
yeah, rely on your friends and your family and the people
Mhm.
you can trust,
Yeah.
and be watching out for
Yeah.
those things.
Well, and you
So
can always take it you slow it down. Like, I think that that's one thing that I didn't think about either is, when just slow it down. If something
right.
feels a little bit wrong or whatever, then just slow it down. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be an all in kind of thing. Oh, sweep you off your feet. Just slow it down to give it a chance to, for things to come out because they generally do in time. So that's why people I think that are manipulating you want to do everything so quickly because they don't want to let you have a chance for things to
Don't
come
want you to
out.
have time to think.
All of a sudden the lies start coming out, or all of a sudden you start thinking that doesn't make sense, or that's not what you told me yesterday, or something like that. I just think that that was a really good example of some of the ways that we get taken in. Doesn't matter, man or woman, doesn't matter. We get
So true.
taken in and we override our intuition, our good sense, because we think we love somebody or we think that they're the best in the whole wide world, and it's just we override all of our good sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys so much for watching. We would love to hear what you guys thought. If you guys watched
Sure.
the documentary, again, it's called Bad Vegan. It's on Netflix. It was a really fascinating watch. So if you guys watched it, have any thoughts about it,
Yeah.
or any thoughts about anything that we talked about, please let us know down below. And then please like, comment, and
Yes.
subscribe.
Please do.
And follow
Take
us on
care.
Instagram. Our Instagram handle is at I have a feeling too. And I try and post. I'm terrible at posting on Instagram, period, but I'm trying really hard to keep up with it. So, um, yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you guys
Thanks for listening. You got your
for
mom
listening.
and daughter combination that are trying to make a safe space for some of this really weird, hard conversations that are there are some of them are just embarrassing. So we're
Yeah.
we're we're trying to bring you into just good stuff.
Yeah, embarrassing, uncomfortable, scary, all that kind of
All of
stuff.
it,
So
yeah.
we're trying to normalize all of those things for
Or let
sure.
it have a platform
Yes.
where you cannot be ashamed.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye.
Bye.